Autumn 2005. A dinghy grinds onto the grey shingle of Stevens Island, off the top of New Zealand's South Island, and 50 TUATARA are carried up a bare, wind-scoured slope in cloth bags. Every person aboard expecting these ancient reptiles to do just one thing: survive on an island the seabirds had abandoned and the soil had forgotten. And before we climb that slope with them, subscribe for more true wildlife comeback stories. There are more of these than you'd believe. Survival was supposed to be the whole story. That's not what happened. Start with the number, because the number is the whole tension. 50. Not 5,000, not a founding herd that could absorb a bad winter. 50 cold animals set down on a place that had, by any honest measure, already died. The topsoil up there had gone grey and thin, the colour of old ash, and almost nothing green held on. You could stand on that slope and see the wind take the dust of it. On paper, 50 is a razor-thin gene pool on a barren rock. On paper, this was a holding action, a dignified way to keep a few of them alive while the island stayed dead. Except the 50 didn't hold. They did something. And what they did happened where no camera was pointed underground, in the dark, inside burrows that were never theirs to begin with. To this day, the scientists who watched it unfold can tell you what changed, and they can measure it to the decimal. But the speed of it, the sheer reach of it, is the thing they still cannot fully explain. Hold that in your mind: 50 animals, and a result nobody planned for. I'm Peter, and this is the full story of how 50 slow, cold-blooded survivors woke a dead island back up. I've spent a lot of years watching places like this fail, so believe me when I say what happened on Stevens is not how these stories usually go. Here's the shape of it. We'll walk the fall of this place first, how it was stripped bare. Then, the one strange mechanism nobody talks about, the quiet engine underneath the whole recovery. Then the release itself, and the results that outran every plan on paper. That's the road. The mechanism is the part that'll stay with you. But before any of that, you need to understand what a TUATARA actually is, because almost everyone gets it wrong. Look at one, and your eye files it away instantly. A lizard, greenish-brown, a spiny crest running down its back, a slow thing basking on a rock. It is not a lizard. It's the last living branch of an order of reptiles called the beakheads, a lineage that was already old when the first dinosaurs appeared and simply never stopped. Everything else on that branch is gone, turned to stone in museum drawers. The TUATARA just kept walking. When you look at one, you are looking at a survivor of a world that ended long before us. And that word survivor is exactly the trap. Because on Stevens Island, the TUATARA wasn't a guest hanging on in a ruined place, waiting to be saved. It was doing the saving. The animal you're picturing as a survivor was actually the builder. Not an inhabitant of that ecosystem, an engineer of it. An engineer of soil, of all things, which is a strange sentence to say about a reptile that can go a full hour between heartbeats. How a cold, slow animal that barely moves could rebuild the ground beneath an entire island. That's the mystery this whole story turns on, and we'll get there. But a builder needs something to build on. And before the 50 could build anything, before the first burrow ever reopened, this island had to be broken completely, deliberately, over the better part of a century. Because when the seabirds left Stevens, something invisible left with them. Something the whole place depended on. And that missing thing is the reason the land forgot how to feed itself. That missing thing was fertilizer. Not the kind you buy in a sack, the kind that arrives on wings, night after night, for 100,000 years. For a century, two forces worked on Stevens at once. Rats, slipping ashore from passing ships, moving through the dry grass in the dark, lifting eggs and chicks straight out of the ground. And people, clearing the slopes for a lighthouse and its pastures, opening the canopy and letting the wind and the rats do the rest. The fairy prions and the diving petrels, the small seabirds that had nested here in their millions, packed into the cliffs like a living honeycomb, collapsed from millions to almost none. And when the last of them stopped coming home, the soil began to die. You could see it. The topsoil went grey and thin. The green things loosened their grip and let go. A cliff face that had once roared at dusk with returning birds fell silent, its old tunnels caving in, one by one. The land was not poisoned. It was simply starving, cut off from the sea that had fed it for longer than anyone can count. Now here is the part most people have never heard. Here's the part that genuinely unsettled the researchers. The reptile and the bird share the same tunnel. Not side by side. The same one. A tuatara moves into a petrel's burrow, and the two of them live pressed together in the dark. The cold reptile and the warm bird, sharing a single doorway to the world above. That arrangement is not a curiosity. It's a machine. Picture the burrow as a pump you can't see, moving the whole sea into the dirt. The seabird flies out over the water, feeds, fills its body with nitrogen and phosphorus, and flies home. It carries that cargo down into the ground, in its droppings, in spilled food, sometimes in its own body when it dies below. The burrow spreads it through the earth, and the tuatara keeps the machine running. It digs, it turns the soil, it opens and aerates the tunnels, loosening the dark ground with its claws, keeping the whole network alive through the long months when the birds are away at sea. Break the loop, and the island starves. And this is the thing nobody talks about. We tend to picture the reptile as a passenger here, a slow, cold-blooded creature riding on the seabird's coattails, taking a free burrow and a bit of shelter and giving nothing back. It is the other way round. The tuatara is not the guest. It is the caretaker of the very infrastructure the whole system depends on. The bird brings the nutrient. The reptile maintains the pipe it travels through. Take the tuatara out, and even a returning seabird has nowhere left to make its delivery, which is why the fix, once someone finally understood the pump, was almost insulting in its simplicity. No management plan, no engineering, no decades of soil treatment, no fertilizer flown in by helicopter, no clever human hand on the controls. You clear the rats, you put the reptiles back, and then you step away and let them do the one thing they have been doing since before the dinosaurs. One lever. That was all of it. So they cleared the rats. They carried up the 50 in their cloth bags, and they set them down in those old empty tunnels, the borrowed burrows, dark and long, abandoned. And then everyone waited. They waited to see whether a burrow network dead for decades could truly reopen on its own, whether a single night out there could ever again fill with the sound of returning prions dropping out of the black sky onto the slope, whether 50 slow animals could restart a pump that had been switched off for a lifetime. And when the numbers finally came back, the soil nitrogen, the invertebrate counts, a survey led by a young field worker named Alana Hughes, they did not match the recovery model. They outran it. Within a decade, the burrow network had reopened, and the prions, fairy prions, gone from this slope for the better part of a lifetime, began landing again at night, all on their own, dropping out of the black onto tunnels the tuatara had kept warm and open through every empty season in between. You have to picture it. A hillside that had gone silent for decades, suddenly loud after dark, the air thick with small grey birds falling out of the sky onto a slope full of open doorways, each one a burrow that had waited. Then the survey put it on paper. In 2018, a field worker named Alana Hughes and her team published their counts in the New Zealand Journal of Ecology, and the numbers simply refused to behave. Soil nitrogen was climbing back the fertilizer the birds carry in their bodies from the open sea, soaking down again into ground that had long forgotten how to hold it, and the invertebrates, beetles, watar, springtails, the small, unglamorous engine underneath every living soil, were coming back 3 to 4 times faster than the recovery model had predicted. Read that number again. 3 to 4 times faster than anyone had modeled. Not a season ahead of schedule, years ahead of it. Plants followed the insects. Green shoots pushed up around the burrow mouths first, then crept outward across the grey, as if the whole island were being coloured back in from 100 separate doorways at once. It greened from the burrows out. And that is the remarkable thing 50 TUATARA did on a slope everyone had written off as barren for good. They didn't just survive it, they rebuilt it from underneath. And here's the quiet joke in it. Everyone climbed that slope to save a few rare reptiles from the very edge of extinction. Nobody wrote, "Restart the soil," on the release form. The TUATARA did that part unasked, moving into a bird's abandoned tunnel, turning the cold earth in the dark, keeping the pump between the open sea and the dead ground alive without a single person telling it to. Now, I want to be honest about what this does not solve. 50 animals is a razor-thin gene pool. Every TUATARA turning that soil tonight traces back to the same tiny founding handful, and a bloodline that narrow is fragile in ways you don't see until something goes wrong. One pregnant rat, off one boat, on one careless night, and the whole quiet miracle could unravel back to grey. Stevens works because it is sealed away, a scrap of rock off the top of the South Island that almost no one can set foot on. It is a fenced-off exception, not a cure for a country. This place didn't heal because we were clever with it. It healed because, for once, we couldn't reach it. That's the hard part. Hold on to it. And yet, the thing that stays with me isn't a number at all. It's a word. In Te Reo Māori, TUATARA means peaks on the back, for the low run of spines that rides the length of its spine, from skull to tail. The old people knew this animal long before any journal ever counted a beetle in that soil. They called it a kaitiaki, a guardian, the keeper of a place. They were right. They were just right in a way the science took 200 years to catch up to, because the TUATARA didn't keep the island the way we mean it, didn't stand watch over something already whole and green. It found a dead place, moved into the dark under it, and put the life back into the ground itself. It didn't keep the island. It rebuilt it. So here is where I leave you. Somewhere off the South Island tonight, in the dark, in a borrowed burrow that a bird once dug. One of the 50 is awake and slow, and turning the soil, doing the same patient, unhurried work its kind has done since before the first dinosaur drew breath, asking nothing of anyone, watched by no one at all. The island sleeps. The engineer works. If a story like this moves you, tell me in the comments which comeback you want next. And subscribe, there are far more of these than you'd believe. Thanks for watching.